So we're in the Dalelands.
Y'all go ahead and start discussing whatever you want. I'm going to figure out why I'm doing
and
this.
welcome to another Mages and Sages podcast with the Mages and Sages of the Forgotten Realms. And who is in here with me? Sing out, identify yourselves, and wave to the nice people out there in online land. Oh, no. Wave as you say your name so we know who you are for the people who aren't already acquainted with
Say your
lovely
name. Say your name.
Your name.
I state your name.
I am Eric Boyd. I got sucked into the realms in Dragon Magazine, and now I'm here having fun. George, it's your turn to explain who you really are.
I am George Krashos. I am a fan of the realms for ever since there was an old grey box and before, and I've never backslid to a Greyhawk, unlike some other people on the panel today.
That
Well,
leaves you,
I'll
Brian.
have you know,
go, Stephen.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Stephen.
No, I'm Stephen Chen, formerly of TSR WotC, and like George, I've never actually worked in Greyhawk. Now that I realize the only trademarks I did not work on at TSR were Dragonlance and Greyhawk. Otherwise, I had something to do with every single other trademark. Gangbusters, Boot Hill, yeah.
Buck Rogers in the 25th century.
Not that one, but I did have something to do with Buck Rogers' High Adventure Cliffhangers.
Ah, yes. High Adventure Cliffhangers. Yes. I love those pants.
We're not going to go there.
I'm Brian Cortillo. I've written a couple of things, and I'm just here for the money.
Not here for the fame?
You're here for the exposure. Ed, get exposing. Sorry.
Not yet, Ed. Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Not the face. And Jeff and Curry.
Oh, hey.
Nudge.
All right, so I'll start. My name's Jeff Thetford, as you can see, because it says so on my name tag. And I've been a fan of the realms for forever. We run the Mages and Pages. You like that? Mages and Sages podcast. And I'm also the head of Ed's fan club. And run the Fans of Ed Greenwood page over on Facebook. And we're just huge fans of the realms and want to squeeze as much content out of these guys as we can while we're still able to. So that's me.
Not dead yet.
That's what I was thinking. Not.
Yes, you are. Shut up.
Oh, you'll be so dead in a moment.
Apologies.
Curry.
There's the occasional Monty Python reference.
That's right.
Curry?
Captain Mustache?
Curry Russell, co-host of the
Monocle
show,
Curry,
producer
Christ.
extraordinaire, fell in love with the realms in 1989. I was terribly ill. In an unfortunate spot, and a friend of mine brought me a book that I swore I would never read, but I got sick enough and bored enough that I opened up the pages of this Forgotten Realms novel, and I was hooked ever since, and was connected to the Dalelands through the Knights of Mythdraenor, and the Dalelands have always been a fun place for me to read about and to adventure in ever since.
Awesome. Well, I think Dalelands is the first place I visited too. And I think all of our campaigns early on, we started in Shadowdale, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And matter of fact, your character retired in Shadowdale with a farm right next to Storm.
That's right.
That's right. There you go. He sits on his front stoop drinking coffee while she chops wood.
As one does.
As one does. That's right.
Why
Good
wouldn't
friends, Storm and I.
What was that, Ed?
Why wouldn't you?
That's true.
With neighbors like that, why wouldn't you?
Well, let's start our dive into this here. So who wants to go first? I think Ed has some things prepared, and any questions? Anybody wants to know anything about the realms? Just let us know in the chat.
George wants to know about the Pool of Yevon.
There you go.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yes.
Where are the Dalelands?
Oh, I hand that off to the man who created the Dalelands.
They exist in the minds of Realms fans everywhere. Okay, in the Realms, the Dalelands are north of Sembia, east of Cormyr, and the mountain ranges east of Cormyr, such as the Thunder Peaks and the Desert's Mouth Mountains, and south of the Moon Sea. Pretty much. There are some outlier dales, and some dales that have come and gone, like Teschendale, and they expand the boundaries somewhat. But right now, the Dalelands that most of the people alive in the realms today know of are sandwiched between the Dragon Reach, Hillsfar, and the Elven Woods, or the Elven Court, and Sembia, and the mountains to the west. So that's the Dalelands. And yes, I can speak to the Pool of Yevon, or not so much the pool, but that mysterious statue of Mystra that stands at the Pool of Yevon. There have long been questions about why, during the time of troubles, did the avatar of the god come and stand and guard that statue when he could have gone to many other places in the realms. Why did he go there? So, there is a statue of Mystra, tall, thin, tapering darkstone gowned smiling woman with her upper head composed of 7 interlocked stars, and her hands raised as if to catch something large, like a basket of laundry. Stands at the Pool of Yevon, facing the pool. It was guarded by Azuth, and we know about that from the modules. They're called modules, you young whippersnappers.
That's right.
FRE2 Shadowdale. Now, what I will tell you, the revelation is that this occurred because the statue was not only a key weave anchor in its own right, it stands over an underground vault that contains vestiges of both Azuth and Mystra. So it's crucial to their survival or replacement if something bad happens to them. So there's the newly revealed secret about the Pool of Yevon.
So what's down there? An eye and a hand, perhaps, of a zoo?
In a glass bell comes from most kids.
Or just a head?
You gotta get ahead in the world. No.
Yeah, you do.
That's it? No, nothing else about the pool?
How did the statues get there, Ed?
How did the statue get there? Oh, that's a mystery for another day.
Well, when
That
a mommy statue and a daddy statue love each other very much.
Yeah. Oh,
Don't break
dear.
Ed so soon, okay, Brian?
That's all I'm here for. I'm not good for anything else.
And the people are starting to show up in the chat over there. So guys, don't forget to ask questions.
Okay, let me go sideways, because very close to the Pool of Yevon is Yevonwood. Strange coincidence there. So,
Let me go sideways.
yeah.
Very close
Ooh.
is Yevon. Strange.
Now we're echoing.
Yeah, now we're echoing all right.
Yeah.
Oh
Who's
dear.
got who's got the echo? Is that the...
Now we're echoing. Yeah.
Curry, it looks like it's you.
Oh dear. What did I do? What happened?
Go
You might
to
be
your
listening
headphones.
on a speaker.
Curry, it looks like it's you.
Yeah, there it is.
What did I do? What happened?
I love it.
I've been listening on a speaker.
Someone put up the test pattern.
It's a delayed action loop.
Pay no attention to what's happening on your screen.
The great and terrible. Oh, no. Press a button.
Press
And
a
Any
then
button
the
will do.
stillness.
There we go. Then there was quiet. There.
Why won't this close? I can't get it to close.
It's not echoing now. It stopped.
The zombie browser.
Oh, maybe it
Okay.
didn't.
Why won't this close?
Nope.
Echo.
Curry, put your headphones on.
Okay.
He's gonna put his headphones on.
I don't think you can complain. You get the podcast twice.
It's
In a
great.
short
That's
order.
right. If you miss a note, we'll be right back with it.
Hey.
There is a couple of questions, and we'll get to those in just a minute. As soon as
Okay,
we-
so in the meantime, I will tell you all about the smallest, most trivial thing that I've dredged up. And this, by the way, is also in Skag. Relshar, the delicious edible mushrooms that are found in Yevonwood in Battledale. And the news is they're spreading rapidly, especially south into Sembia, but also west, deeper into the woods.
Hmm.
Now, let me tell you all about Relshar mushrooms, because, no, there's a test later. A Relshar mushroom is a chestnut brown, large, and by large I mean adult human palm size, or up to twice that big.
Wow.
Durable, almost like leather when raw, so it doesn't easily tear or break, though it can be easily twisted off its lighter beige stem or uprooted in one piece. Mushroom that grows up to 8 inches in height, usually in clumps. It tastes very like buttery beef. And before you go, ugh,
Yeah.
or what's that? It tastes like roast beef or beef gravy. And as it cooks, it gives off not just water, but a greasy secretion that it can be fried in, as if you were frying in butter, but without the butter. In addition to all this, if you keep harvested Relshar covered, away from direct bright sunlight, they keep for more than a 10-day before they either rot if they're too damp, or they wither if they're too dry. And so they make an ideal market sale crop, because you can pick and travel and sit there all day selling. There you go.
But they're no good if they're dried?
Oh no, they're okay if they're dried, but they won't get as good a price
Sure. Okay.
because they're dried. Yeah, but yeah, you can take them home and use them like frontier and pioneer Americans used to slice up apples and then hang them.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
or like Europeans used to hang up onions
Right.
in the
Okay.
kitchen for easy, slit open the top of the sleeve, take the onion.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. Pool of Yevon and Relshar.
Very nice. Where does the name Lord Macaroni asked? Where does the name Yevon come from?
It comes from a particular mage, Yevon. That's all in the history of the realms.
Ah.
And he merged with the waters. No, that's Ashaba. But wait a moment. I am getting an emergency from my wife.
Oh no, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
The Lady of the Lake.
That's right. That's right. Here's one that maybe y'all can. That maybe Eric's. I know Eric so loves the gods he created them twice that he wants to.
and steadied them.
Eric, you're muted. We
No,
can't
we
hear
like
you.
it that way.
Yeah, Eric, we can't hear you. So
I can hear you now.
there we
How's
go.
that?
Nice,
Mhm.
nice. This is actually I had it here now. It's gone. It was one of the questions from Candlekeep. I'm not sure who
I've-
asked it, but I'll find it.
I've got it, Jeff.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah. So on Candlekeep, Elsaris asked all the questions from Candlekeep, but one of them says that the Forgotten Realms Interactive Atlas lists the Seat of Bane, southeast of Aberrath's Folly. Is this a temple or some sort of holy site?
That's a really good question.
Yes,
And
it is.
if I remember correctly, the reason I'm hesitating is because I suspect that one actually came off Ed's original maps. If I remember correctly, that is buried on, it was originally buried on one of like the first edition maps. I think maybe the Forgotten Realms Atlas by Karen Wynn Fonstad.
Yeah.
If I'm remembering, I'm trying to load it while I talk here. I think that's where that was. So, and we'll ask Ed again when he comes back, but here's what I would guess. My guess is it is somehow related to the thrones that Ed talks about in FA FA1 Halls of the High King, which, while it is set in the Moonshays, is actually one of the best sources of Bane lore. And so I suspect it is related to one of those thrones that he talked about there. Hopefully I'm not totally misremembering this. And so I would probably say it is the result of some effort of one of the lead Banite worshippers, the High Imperceptors, to conquer the northern Elven Woods, as you know, as one does, and got left there as a result. But the exact story hasn't been told. But Ed could have a totally different answer, so we'll see when he gets back.
And this is all predating all the standard Banites and whatnot from the gray box and so forth, right?
Oh yeah, long time ago. Yes. In fact, George and I tried to reverse engineer sort of the rise of Bane, and we put something on the DM's Guild
Oh, you
about
fools.
Jurgle, the Lord of the End of Everything. And in the third section of that, we talked about the rise of the Dark Three. And at least in my mind, the Dark Three were kind of like, you know, after school when you and your buddies were playing D&D and you decided to all play chaotic evil characters and rise till you were 100th level. That's the Dark Three.
Pretty much.
It was first edition, so we just teleported straight down into the bottom of hell and we killed Asmodeus and got his treasure. Yeah.
Exactly.
And that gave us the experience to hit 100th level, you know.
That sounds typical.
Okay.
Okay, and also there's one here that question. It's by Patty Plays. Why did the gods not speak of Aramikos?
Oh, Aramikos again. I mean, great.
I know.
Jeff, those questions were covered in the last
Love
time.
Aramikos.
Oh,
Yeah.
was that covered last time?
Yes,
I'm sorry,
that
that
was
was
covered
an
in
old
the last
question.
session.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. That was old. Never mind. Forget that. So, Brian asked that question again of Ed, and
I gave my answer, Ed, but I was stalling till you got here.
Uh-oh.
it was
So,
making
Ed,
up stuff on the spot.
On Candlekeep, someone asked, the FR Interactive Atlas lists the Seat of Bane southeast of Aberrath's Folly. Is
Yes.
this a temple or some sort of holy site? Or
It
something
is a
covered
holy
under
site.
NDA?
No, it's a holy site to a certain sort of devout follower of Bane. If you've ever been anywhere near Edinburgh in Scotland, there is a place that people climb to called Arthur's Seat. As in, King Arthur was supposed to have sat there. Guess what? All over the British Isles, there's Arthur's this, Arthur's that, Arthur's the other thing. I'm sure he didn't make it to any of them. However, that doesn't stop them being named after him, and over the years, a whole bunch of legends, local legends, spring up around them. And the Seat of Bane is similar. It's considered sacred to the god Bane. It's supposedly where the god Bane sat and decided what he was going to do when he was messing with mortal kingdoms, and how he was going to deploy Yashtu's Vim, the godson. And supposedly, if you are a devout follower of Bane and you go to the Seat of Bane now and you pray to Bane there, Bane will hear you, and if he feels like it, you'll get a personal answer. A voice speaking out of the seat, as in, you can ask him, should I do this with my life? Or should I do this right now? And he will tell you. Could be incredibly useful to certain people in the realms as to
Follow-up
how they
question
live
to
their
that.
lives.
And a follow-up to that. Given the successful deployment of Zvim immediately prior to third edition, I mean, he did what he was created to do.
Yes.
In terms of serving as a vessel for the return of his father.
He established the line of Zvimage.
There hasn't been a whole lot of lore since then about whether Zvim was entirely destroyed, returned to existence by his father to serve as some kind of servitor, escaped his father's influence. Are there any hints that we should be looking for anywhere that would reveal what DMs might do in that vein?
Sure. The hints are fact that in so many passing instances, Zvim has been seen in the realms since his death. Like all sorts of people think they've seen Zvim or have heard of somebody who saw Zvim from afar, or Zvim was doing this. They were definitely in the Zvim, you know. But
Are there any enchanters that walk around saying that there are some that call him Zvim?
sure, why not? No, but the point is,
Apologies.
if Zvim is well and truly destroyed, then his father is messing with mortals by using magic to make others appear like Zvim so that he can be seen again and again. It's far more likely that Zvim is still around in some form. Now, my personal belief in this is that Zvim was destroyed and his father brought him back, and the Zvim that's been brought back is far more a puppet, far more under his father's control. So instead of defying his father and running around doing wild and reckless things, he's far more a tool in his father's hands. So he will show up and do or say something. And it's what he's under the direct control of Bane, and he's doing what Bane wants to work on manipulating mortals. And there's a lot of time when Zvim is not seen. Whereas the old Zvim, the real Zvim, the Zvim of his own independent, defiant of his father's sentience, was always somewhere and was usually being really noisy about it because he was, let's face it, a thug. He was, and I don't mean that as in he was a thuggy. I mean he was a thug as in the sort of person who browbeats and threatens others to get what he wants constantly. So he was quite loud in his life. It doesn't go away. And the news Vim appears, does or says something, and then nobody really sees where he goes, and he's not heard from again for a 10-day or a month or 2 months, and then he pops up again. So I would suspect far more that this Vim materializes when his father wants him to.
Thank you. Not quite the same old Zvimin's vigor.
No, that's right.
I'm done now, Eric. Don't worry.
So I might add too that there's one unexplained reference to Zvim that we tucked way back in the 700s.
Done now, Eric. Don't worry.
So I might add too that there's one unexplained reference to Zvim that we tucked way back in the 700s when he arrived. I'm getting a real echo.
That was full on.
That was interesting.
I'll try it again. There's one really old reference that we tucked way back in the 700s to Zvim.
I've heard of that. Was full on. Oh no.
Seemed to have a loop here.
Yeah, that's kind of strange. Where Zvim appeared in Westgate out of a portal of unexplained origin. And I think there's hints of that either in Cloak and Dagger or the Cloak and Dagger webs enhancement to start, and it might have worked its way into Grand History. But I always wondered, where did he come from? You know, does he have some sort of extra planar lore or someplace else? Go ahead, Stephen.
It's Lyra pretending to be Zvim.
It could be that too. It could be that too. But yeah, no, I always kind of wondered where he was. And if he was alive, I always imagined that when he wasn't romping around in the realms, he was probably, if you use the Great Wheel cosmology, lurking on Acheron with other outcasts and exiles, rabble raising a group of outcast devils into an army of sorts. Because that's what one does when you're bored.
Of course.
Mhm.
Of course.
I
Of
have
course.
I have to admit, the one thing I never followed or swallowed with the whole story of Vim explodes and Bane comes out of him. It's like, didn't we have a nice little legend of Athena having just kind of exploded out of Zeus's forehead, and Zeus was fine after that. I don't know why Vim wouldn't be, except for a lack of foresight. I don't know.
Oh, oh.
All right. Any more to that question, Brian?
Yeah.
Okay. He does have some more. Elcerus does have some more questions on there, doesn't he?
On Candlekeep, yes.
Okay. Okay.
You want me to share them?
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. So this one is a bit more general, but it's a request to tell us a bit about Dwarven society and how it's structured. A Dwarven kingdom, they guess, is run differently than a human monarchy. Like, are the mines commonly owned by everyone? How does the tax structure work, etc.? To keep with the Dalelands theme, would Anathar's Dell or Glen work as such a location? I'm just reading the question.
Yeah.
What, you want me to answer? Come
Yeah.
on, Dwarven expert. Okay, I'll very shortly, I'll do the very short form. To a dwarf, unless there is a direct directive from a god, mines are commonly owned. And by that, it doesn't mean like the dwarves will stand back if Derogar or orcs or somebody else comes in and says, "Oh, we're going to mine this." It means within a clan and within the lands they hold, one part of the clan or one member of the clan can't tell other members of the clan, "Stay away, this vein's mine." The mineral wealth is for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to hold true, and has been holding true for a very, very long time, because it wasn't true way back in the dawn of time, and there was so much bitter fighting within clans that the dwarves soon realized that with their low birth rate, they would wipe each other out if they didn't change things. So they came to that basic understanding. It became the common custom.
Is that for all clans?
Pretty much. I mean, a clan somewhere could be run differently, in the same way that you go up into the hill country, and there are some strange families up there that that do things differently. The Hatfields and the McCoys,
Right. Right.
but in general,
The Dwargar.
dwarven clans will behave in the same way.
And one can assume there's probably clans or very isolated clans or families that keep their mines secret. And so whilst they remain secret, they don't have to share them with anyone.
That's right.
But if they are discovered by other clans or dwarves, etc., then they can't say, "Well, these are ours." But as long as no one knows about it, that mithril's mine.
Yep. Yeah. If nobody knows where it came from. But on the other hand, if you're dumb enough to show up in a brand new mithril coat and with rings of mithril and with a bag full of mithril coins, even if you don't tell anybody where you got them and refuse to answer, you can be expected to be followed and with some interest from then on.
And then you have to go to Mordor and get rid of the One Ring.
That's right.
Yes. One does not simply walk
Walk
into
the
that
Dales.
actually begs an
Contour
interesting
maybe,
question. Ed, does that mean from the dwarven perspective that what's taken from a communal mine belongs to the community, or do I, as a dwarf, is it more like the commons, where if I work it and I take the metal's mine?
The metal's yours, but you are expected to share a bit with the neediest families and with the temples, as in the clerics, and you do that by giving it to the elders, who see that it's fairly distributed. Like, so you don't have to so you won't play favorites. Hey, there's my sweetheart, I'll go and give her the share. Or so that you say, I don't like my rival so-and-so, so I'll make sure he doesn't get any. And to avoid all of that, you give it to the clan elders. And it's like a tithe. It's a percentage.
So some will
And-
come off the top, as it were,
Yes.
and then you
10
distribute the
10
rest as you choose.
Yeah. 10% normally, and it could be an extra 5 or even 10% for everybody, not for you personally, but for everybody in the clan, if the clan elders have determined that it's really needed
Mhm.
or something, like rebuilding a bridge. So if, for instance, Tolkien was in the realms and the Fellowship of the Ring was going through a dwarven hold of Moria, and they fought that Balrog and the bridge collapsed. Well, we got to rebuild the bridge, fellas, or nobody gets out the West Way. Well, okay, extra money needs to be set aside now for that rebuilding.
Mhm.
So something like that would be why the percentage would go up.
Mm.
So yeah, there'd always be a little percentage, but then what you make of it is yours. So there's a difference between the value of the ore coming out and what you make of it. If you are the best axe maker and you make beautifully balanced axes and you want to sell them, you get to sell them as yours. The rest of the clan doesn't get to come along and pick up your axes and sell them as if they'd made them. They're yours. You made those. An axe of Dwali Horan's son is his axe, and he signed it right here. You know.
So to jump all the way across Faerun away from the Dales, Ed. So if I'm in Citadel Adbar in the north,
Yep.
and I'm the king of Citadel Adbar,
Mm-hmm.
how do I make my money?
You tax,
Okay.
and your taxes are basically not income tax. They are a tax on entrances of trades goods from other people coming into Citadel Adbar through the gates. They're a tax on wagons leaving, and they're a realty tax, meaning if you occupy this building, this precious real estate within the walls of Citadel Adbar, you pay an annual levy. And the annual levy is determined in public to match the needs of rebuilding Citadel Adbar, or making sure the streams are still pure because you dig out stuff, plus whatever you publicly agree should be set aside for a rainy day. So in other words, the king isn't building a giant treasury of secret Pentagon money that he gets to spend without accounting to it for it to anyone else, and he isn't getting rich on the backs of the people. He is openly and publicly saying the levy is going to have to amount to this much. So as there are this many of you in the coming year, your share is, and he has to pay it like everybody else, but he doesn't have to pay it for the palace. He has to pay it for any private holdings he has inside Citadel Adbar. So if he's a landlord, or if he has a private house, or if he stashes his mistress in a rented house, he has to pay for that like anybody else who's renting a house would. So it's very, in some ways, democratic. And I don't mean it's democratic as in everybody has a say. It's democratic as in it attempts to be fairly fair about sharing the economic burdens. In other words, the way democracy is supposed to work, not the way it usually works in practice in any real world country.
Of course. Okay.
I have a complete tangent on that one if you want, Jeff.
Go for
please. No, go ahead.
All right. So the questioner asked, and he referenced 2 dwarven settlements in the Dalelands, but he missed at least one that folks do not know much about. Go ahead, Ed.
Nope.
Okay.
Take it away. I remember this very well.
All right. Well, yeah, I don't know. You may not hear. Let me go with it. So George and I have been working out the history of Besselmer, among other places, which is a rare surface realm of dwarves in the Savage North. And you may think that I'm completely off
So we're in
from
the
the
Dalelands.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm getting there. Just let me go. So of the major
One does
clans,
not simply walk.
of the major clans of Besselmer, which included Black Axe, Dragonsteel, Galloglar, Hondax, Rockfist, and Snowsbattle, we are going to talk about Dragonsteel. So when the Giant Storm War happened, Clan Dragonsteel and Clan Arlspar fled south. Each of the clans went different directions. And in what would be negative 4,158 Dale Reckoning, they founded a city called Canaglim, which we first see in the Waterdeep book 3 of the Avatar series, a subterranean city in the upper Underdark, close to the site of present-day Dragonspear Castle. As the hold lay beneath the lands historically claimed by Ilfarn, the stout folk of Clan Arlspar and Dragonsteel kept the existence of their city a secret for millennia thereafter. So we've made it from the Desserin River Valley down to Dragonspear Castle, but we're still going to get to the Dalelands. So, you know, the Canalgum went on. It became part of Falorm, the Realm of Three Kings, when it was discovered in the Year of Errant Kings by Baron the Fair of Clan Ironaxe. And it became part of the Duchy of Hunabar. And then in the year of the Supreme Duelist, 592, troll forces attacked. And with the exception of the hidden city of Canalgum, the dwarves abandoned the Duchy of Hunabar and relocated to the northern Duchy of Dareth. So you still had Clan Dragonspiel and Arlspar down there in Canalgum. But we never really knew why that city fell. You know, they kept on there until the Year of the Lost Hunt. And in the Year of the Lost Hunt, drow from a little known city called Zanharalok on the shores of Lake Thorut in the Underdark beneath Cormanthyr, see, I was getting there, constructed a portal that opened in the heart of Canalgum and launched a surprise raid on the Dwarven city. And we picked up this little hint from an article on the Wizards website. And they launched a surprise raid. But the stout folk surprised the drow with the strength of their resistance, and they forced the dark elves to retreat. They followed them back through the portal, and then they sacked the unprepared drow city, turning the lake, Lake Thorut, red with drow blood. And if you look on the map in Dritz de Werden's Guide to the Underdark, you'll see Lake Thorut. And in the chaos of the fighting, however, the portal closed, trapping the dwarven invaders of Clan Arlspar and Clan Dragonsteel far from home. And so that's why underneath Cormanthyr, you will find the descendants of the dwarves of Besselmer, and they still lie there today. How's that for a tangent, Jeff?
Very nice. No, that's perfect. Are you kidding?
And Canalgum has since fallen, of course. So really all that's left of those
golf claps all around.
Really, that's all that's left of those two clans is actually in Cormanthyr, even though they came from Besselmer to begin with.
Right.
So now they live in a drow city under Cormanthyr.
For now.
Well, yeah. They're gonna end up in Impleter. They're gunning for Impleter, George.
Oh my God.
Everyone is.
Can I use that to take a tangent?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a leading question. Which dales have the highest concentrations of non-humans, not elves? I'm thinking more halflings, dwarves, gnomes.
It'd have to be Deepingdale, wouldn't it? They've got the most elves. They've got lots of elves.
Deepingdale has a lot of elves.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I think Arkandale had a fair number of dwarves.
Well, Daggerdale's got dwarves as well. So.
Yeah, Daggerdale.
Yeah, that's true.
And then Scardale has a smattering of everybody from everywhere.
Okay.
Humans, half, all races, because Scardale's the most how shall I put it, cosmopolitan, as in everybody wanted to get in there at various times.
Okay.
Why Scardale?
Scardale was the expansionist one that the expansions were being sponsored and pushed by the Zentrim, by various foreign interests.
Mm-hmm.
Is that because it's a port town?
Yes.
Okay.
And by the way, I have something to say about Featherdale right next door.
Yay!
Yay.
That's
As
where the
he
best feather boas in the realms come from.
That's right.
he's
No,
he's
go right ahead.
segued smoothly. So Featherdale is the least typical dale because it's not really a dale. It's not a valley. It's a political division. And it's also the breadbasket of them all. It's the pastoral farming basket, which means it's incredibly useful. It's also incredibly easily conquered because it's where all the independent, I don't want no stinking government type farmers move to. So they don't have a standing army. They don't have defenses. But somehow it never seems really very often to get conquered. Sembia briefly conquered it and occupied it, but that was Sembia with the Netherese of Sultansar up their backsides. So it was the Sembian puppet with the hand of Shade controlling it. And the moment Shade literally fell, so did the Sembian control of all of that area of the Dales. So traditionally, independent, ambitious interests located in Scardale that aren't really independent. Some of them are sponsored by Mulmaster or Tantris or various Zentri merchants who are angling to own a dale that they can use as a stepping stone to dominate or outright conquer dale after dale in the future. And so both squeeze Hillsfar into subjugation and Sembia's influence and likely northern advance. In part, these are being thwarted by an unlikely alliance that's resident in Scardale, in Featherdale, that most people don't know is there. There's a silver dragon, even Davilar, who dwells in Featherdale posing as the brisk but elderly human herbalist, scents and salves maker Shavara Hilmer of Feather Falls, who has a sideline in selling new wagon wheels to needy traveling merchants. She just lays in a stack of them of various sizes and then she has them in a shed. And if you break a wheel, oh, I can sell you a replacement. Then you can have that one fixed later on. It'll cost you less money. Oh, okay. And this silver dragon is working with doppelgangers who take various human guises to act as spies and covert dirty tricks agents. And they're doing this because they like their easy, abundant food lives in Featherdale and they don't want anything to change. And they're also working with a green hag who poses as old Amrys Narveld, who lives in rural western Featherdale as a human crone on her increasingly overgrown, sucking bog dominated farm where she grows and sells mushrooms. And she distills birch sap for sweets and as a cooking syrup. And all of these people in this little alliance work together to scare away, maim, or arrange permanent mysterious disappearances for ambitious Scardalers who are in Featherdale to take over. Featherar have no idea that this alliance is in their midst or protecting them, but it has recently assassinated a Red Wizard of Thay who was spying out the area for unknown but likely new Thayan base reasons. A spy from Hillsfar who is trying to blackmail several locally popular but debt-ridden Featheran farmers on the orders of Malkin Grenfeld, the Chamberlain of Hillsfar. And they also wiped out the entire 9-strong Cantobil Cloak, a Kalashite adventuring band hired by the Sembian merchant Alvar Archvur of Serloon to stealthily take over governance of Featherdale by magically influencing and, in private, just plain threatening, various influential Featherar elders. The cloak is known to have murdered the farmer Hales Amerzon of Westfeather, which is a hamlet west of Blackfeather Bridge, and the baker and cordial maker Mother Mara dance oral of Blackfeather Bridge. Ta-da!
Hmm.
There's the Featherdale.
And for
secret.
some of you, there will be a spelling test at the end of this for those names.
I will in the fullness of time hand all of this to you, Brian, and you can post it somewhere, or Jeff, you can post it somewhere, or Curry, you can post it somewhere, and I will hand it to George and Eric, who can incorporate it into something.
There you go. No, we can always post it on the fan page as well.
Or all of those.
Yeah.
I love it. It
Becomes
was
a
great.
400-page supplement.
No, yeah. And it'll never get finished, right?
That seems a little short.
That's just
And
the
I have-
footnotes, Eric.
I have just one more lore tidbit, which we can save for later in the podcast, about the Dales, called the Tattered Mage.
Ooh, I like
Let's
that.
save that for later. I actually had a follow-up of the question about dwarves, Ed. It's something
Yeah.
you mentioned.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that the dwarves that don't live in the north and don't descend immediately from the Delzun traditions tend to not necessarily have kings or chieftains as their leaders. You mentioned a bunch of times the clan elders.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a function of size? Is that a function of whether they ever had a kingdom to be descended from? What's the source of that?
No, that's largely the source of bad past history, as in royal families dying fighting while leading the clan, or being targeted by enemies of the clan. Oh, I'll kidnap the king, or I'll kidnap the king's daughter, or I'll kidnap the king's son and heir, and then I'll have control to tell them what to do. And of course, the usual dwarven response to that was to tell them to go jump. I'm gonna be polite here. And so they would usually assassinate their captive, just cut their losses, literally. And so royal families did not have a good track record or history of survival. They either died fighting for the clan, or they died because of bad things that happened, or they, in some cases, there were feuds as clans broke up and they didn't survive. And in other cases, the clan elders, and by that I mean the patriarchs and matriarchs of the longest standing families of the clan, just decided that royalty was getting out of hand. We'd gone away from people who were good leaders as people to their sons and daughters who just inherited the important position and were wholly unsuited, or in some cases uninterested, in providing leadership. Well, so we're better off without them. Let's just set them aside, and they can be king of this cavern over here, and we'll all move away. So by and large, the royal families didn't last. There are lots of Thorin Oakenshields, if you know what I mean,
Right,
running
right.
around
No.
with no land to call their own for whatever reason. And in some cases, they're fighting to get it back. And some cases, it's more like the Monty Python. I'm Brian, and my wife is too. So you have rival claimants, and the clan just says, we don't need any of these chuckleheads.
Yeah, that actually always interested me when you talk about Gellin and the Iron House of Tethyamer. There always seemed to be like almost a legendary future king. We'll take it back when we're ready. But it didn't seem like there was sufficient interest among the dwarves of the region in amassing an army and actually bothering to go and chase out the goblin folk and then the Zents that were going to come in and try and push them out again.
Yeah.
Like, what are we going to bother for?
Yeah. One of the macro things I was doing with the realms, and I'm doing this as a young kid, okay? There's no D&D yet. I'm doing this just as a setting to entertain myself, is if you have a people that is few in number, dwindling, beset on all sides, because the orcs breed like rabbits. So when you have a battlefield lost to an orc or drow or Derogar, you can't replace it as fast as you lose it. So the dwarves are under pressure, and they're fiercely independent. I see them as, because they're under pressure, they're trying all sorts of different things in terms of, how they govern themselves, what lives they try and lead, where they move to. It's sort of like, I don't want to go full Seven Lost Tribes thing, but I mean, it's sort of like they are searching for their place in the realms because their place is under attack. Their quote rightful place is under attack, and they've had to adapt over and over again. So that's pushed them into, we adapt to survive mode, as opposed to, we have always lived in these halls and we will fight to the last dwarf. They're down to, we can't afford to do that stupidity anymore. So so they're searching for different ways, and it means they're all coming up with different solutions. So interestingly, Andrew Dewar, one of the original Realms players, and I had an afternoon discussion while walking through the ravine parks of Don Mills as teenagers, in which we talked about, so is there a Dwarven oligarchy? Is there a Dwarven mageocracy? Is there a Dwarven, and we went through all of the possible things we could come up with as systems of government. And is there a clan that tried this? Is there a clan that tried that? Is there a clan that tried the other thing? And we agreed that there probably were some dwarves who wanted to try everything, maybe not all of them at the clan level yet. But if things kept going, because remember, Thunder Blessing comes along later. That's a TSR thing. But if things keep on keeping on the way they're keeping on, they may try anything. They may try trapping a human or an elven wizard and saying, hey, do you guys know the clone spell? Okay, this guy over here is our best fighter. Could you clone 40 of him? And this old man over here, he's getting really old and bits are dropping off him. But he had the most kids. So could you clone 20 of him and they'll set about repopulating the species? Or whatever. I was thinking they would try anything. They'd be pushed into and that was sort of never written down in the published realms, but it was always in the back of my mind that the dwarves have their backs to the wall. They're going to try everything, and they're all going to try different solutions. Some of them are going to be disasters, but they've been pushed out of their not thinking about their rightful place in the world because they just assume what their rightful place is. In real world terms, it's like going back to Europe when everybody was building huge empires, and they just thought this is what you did. And you tried to do it faster than your rivals, but you all did it. Or the early days of America when you were past the birthing pangs of fighting for independence and you're now into the American dream. Anybody can go from a lonely log cabin to, and nobody's questioning that yet. Because yes, there are people who are frozen out of that from the beginning, but we're not paying any attention to them yet because the myth is so strong and it's the guiding light. In the same way, the dwarves have been pushed out of that in the way that the elves had already quietly realized, with the return and so on, and they realized they can't outproduce the orcs plus the humans combined, and they're going to be pushed out. And of course, that's the unwritten secret of the realms today. Between the humans and the orcs, and particularly the orcs in the north, if things don't change, they're going to push everybody else out. Just because there are so many little orcses every spring.
Well, it's time for an orc horde now anyway. So
yes. Yeah. Well, and of course, there is the artificial thing that the publication history, when control of the copyright passes out of my hands into TSR and then later Wizards, if you have an orc horde, then you are making obsolete a whole bunch of products that you've already published, and being as the Savage Frontier was an early one, and Waterdeep in the North was an early one, and the Moonshades was an early one, and that's all in the Sword Coast area. If you have an Orc Horde sweep down and wipe all of those out, and the early Bob novels that were such successes, Crystal Shard and so on, are all set up in the Uthgard area, Spine of the World, the Frozen Far, and you're going to make everything there obsolete by having an Orc Horde wipe everything out. So let's not do it. So an Orc Horde gets delayed. It just doesn't show, and it doesn't show, and it doesn't show. And there's the only problem with that is it's the same way with saying, oh, there's going to be a big one someday. You know, the San Francisco earthquake.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we still haven't had one. It's going to be really big someday. The stress is building. So
I bet if you guys lean on Jeff a little bit and say the magic word, he'll tell you all about Fletch and how he's recorded the dwindling of the Dwarven clans, if he were so inclined.
Well, it wasn't Fletch, actually. It was they had created in my storyline. There was this hall of the ancients kind of that Morden would visit often because he was trying to find a way to boost the clans, and he had these. I think I called it was it Orovindar? I don't remember now.
Sounds about right.
I think it was Orovindar, and there was a central point in his realm where each clan that he created and those thereafter shot out from. It's like a star chamber. And each clan had an Orovindar that would go down and carve the history of each clan as it went through the ages. So it was infinite. He was hoping it would be infinite, but problem is the more times he went down there, he found that the Orovindars, a lot of them had become still and stopped working because the clans were dwindling so badly. So he was down to like less than 100 clans at that time, I think. So
now, just to keep Eric informed, because I know he's hanging on the edge of his seat, you're going to have to explain to Eric who Fletch was, because he's going to need to know this.
Oh.
He was the star of a bunch of novels by
No,
Gardner.
yeah, portrayed by Chevy Chase, right? No, Fletch was actually a gnome stone builder who worked for Dumathorn. Actually,
I can't hear you.
He worked for Moradin, and the part that you see him in there, he's carving an army of stone dwarven soldiers for Dumathorn, and but he's a gnome. And his name was Fletch.
You just keep ruining the story. So can I go on a tangent so we stop talking about gnomes?
Nobody knows the tangent.
So you cannot figure out the dwarves of the Dalelands without thinking about the cultural migration patterns. I've said that over and over again, right? So you have your dwarves and they start out in the Great Rift, and then there's the group that breaks off and forms Shanatar, Deep Shanatar, and eventually High Shanatar. And then as that starts to fall, you have one, I'm thinking like, you guys remember, I'm going to annoy George here. You guys remember in the old World of Greyhawk box set, there was that cool map with the arrows that showed where the migration patterns went?
Yeah.
So that's in my head. Okay. So anyhow, but
always in your head.
So you have one group of dwarves that go up north and settle Hongandar. And that's kind of one cultural tradition that kind of fades away. And you have another group that goes and forms Garagar. And that splits off, and you get Delzoon and you get Besselmer, and from Delzoon you eventually get Dareth all the way over east of the Great Glacier. But that kind of leaves out Warngren, which was sort of around Darkhold kind of area, and then it also leaves out all the different small dwarven kingdoms that are in the Dalelands, and the ones that we know about for sure. Way back in the day, you was already mentioned Tethymir. I think Brian mentioned that, but there was also under the Thunder Peaks, there was the Dwarven Kingdom. I'm blanking on the name. I think it was the Thunderhome. Thank you. That Oglarosa occupies now, and then over in the Vast, you had is it Roldalar? I always get the name wrong. Rodalar.
Yeah, but before that, you've got Sarthul, which is Major.
Yeah, up in the sort
Dwarven
of
Kingdom.
northeast part under like the River Liss kind of area. So you
Mm.
had some, but we've never really figured out sort of what that migration pattern was. And but it's definitely like a third cultural stream different from the ones that went up the Sword Coast. So I think a lot of the things that Ed was saying about the differences you can account for by kind of thinking that is a third cultural stream that kind of went northeast as opposed to the other two that went north out of Shanatar. Does that make, hopefully, made a little bit of sense?
Well, when the Great Rift, when Barindon collapses or if there's an exodus from it, it's Tark Shanat goes west into and forms High Shanatar, and that's the start of the dwarven migration that ultimately ends up in the north. But the dwarves originally came from the Yehemals all the way over near Karatur. And so I can see that before they actually got all the way to the Great Rift, there would have been other dwarven migrations that just simply went north. The dwarven realm of Dareth is an interesting one because the Dareth dwarves exist before dwarves from the north come across and basically pull them out of the fire because they're under assault from a white dragon kingdom. So Dareth, I think, is a direct migration from the earliest time of the dwarves and probably had nothing to do with Bayerindin and the Great Rift. And similarly, Ogran was separate, I would have thought, from Shanatar, or maybe came from Shanatar in a different time from Hogdanar and the Delzun, etc. So, and Sarfil, probably was the first great kingdom that came up from the Yehemals and didn't go to the Great Rift, and Sarfil dwarves probably went on further north and east to form Dareth. So, yeah, I'm not a fan of the idea that Shanatar was the genesis of everything. Sorry, that's my phone ringing.
But you see, when you think, I mean, it sounds obscure, like how does this apply to my campaign? But if you think through these things, then that can explain why the different dwarven kingdoms have different cultural traditions, and you can kind of fit in what you want.
I've got a question that might tie into that, Eric. Culturally, does that lend to the idea that there's seemingly always a dwarf or set of dwarves looking for a lost home or a lost citadel or something that has just been sucked up by time? Is that related to the migration patterns of just strongholds that have just been left due to just moving along or needing to survive or needing to explore and examine, and then through time and legend, these old homes become sought out places that they eventually want to travel back to in one form or another?
I think there's a lot of it in that, right? I mean, we talked about in past times about, one of the sad things about the dwarves is, in some sense, if there was no one else on Faerun, the dwarves would wander around, build, live someplace for a few thousand years, mine it to its, completion, and then move on and sort of leave the old halls behind. And some would argue, well, we shouldn't have left. There's probably still more there. And others would be like, yeah, but we got a new place now. The problem is the dwarves aren't living on a planet with nobody else. They're living on a planet with humans and elves and orcs and dragons and all these other races. And a lot of the places that they leave behind actually then let some of those other races like orcs survive and breed and grow to the point where they're wiping out the dwarves in the first place. So, the dwarves are in some sense self-defeating by building all these places they used to live and then moving on. They're creating places for their enemies to grow strong. So part of that nostalgia is, well, there was probably some more gems or metal that we left behind. Plus my ancestors lived there and I'm proud of them. And part of it is, wow, that was foolish to give up the old place. If we just held on, then such and such wouldn't have grown into a big new place. And so I think you get sort of this, one of the recurring themes I think you were getting at is sort of melancholyism, where, the dwarves are always sort of melancholy about the lost last home. But it's a question, were the dwarves of Shanatar really like that? I'm not sure that they necessarily were, because that was sort of that first blush of we're building new, but even then they had lost Berindin in the Great Rift. So there still was some, but that feeling of melancholy, I think, accelerates with every generation as there's more and more that has been lost to the dwarves. So it's sort of this ever expanding sadness of ancestral lands lost to time.
I like that answer. Thank you.
All right, something else. Ed, you got another piece of that piece of.
I have another piece.
All
Yes.
right.
I will hold my peace. No, it's right here. Okay, so the last thing is the Tattered Mage.
Yeah.
A Wizshade haunts, in quotation marks, the ruins of Castle Grimstead, or drow-destroyed Castle Greatstead, in Shadowdale. And whenever threatened, he winks out and translocates, teleports, to Castle Craig in Shadowdale, or to one of several ruins in Mistranor, or to one of the northernmost ghost holds, overgrown abandoned mansions in Battledale, where his deliberately menacing appearances have scared a Sembian would-be rebuilder of the mansion, Grost Havermirth of Selgaunt, into abandoning it and fleeing, or one of several abandoned watch keeps in the Thunder Peaks and Desertsmouth Mountains. This Wizshade appears as a tall, thin man in a gray, incredibly tattered, it's frayed into hundreds of ragged strips, robe, who stands silently watching, unless attacked, whereupon he typically starts blinking rapidly around an area, always fetching up momentarily close behind or disconcertingly nose to nose with those who've attacked him. He's what's become of one of Vangardahast's apprentices, Relver Summerwood, an ambitious war wizard from Suzail, who in 1365 DR went on a daring mission to Castle Grimstead, where he got caught in a spell duel with several Zentrum mages and went silent, and was presumed destroyed by Cormyr. What actually happened was he slew several of the Zents, but was caught in the backlash of one of his own battle spells when it collided with hostile magics hurled by no less than 3 foes, and he was vaporized. They thought they destroyed him, but he coalesced again several nights later as a Wizshade. It's thought by war wizards investigating since that Relver appears in ruins he explored while on war wizard business and places he liked. And he's been left to continue his existence as a useful guardian / deterrent to keep Zent, Sembian, and Hilsfarian opportunists from seizing and rebuilding properties in the Dales, that their occupations of which would lessen Cormyr's influence and reach. Ta-da!
Just
Like
off the top of your head.
Just off the top of his head, yeah.
This is what I do. This is my life.
Jeez.
I know.
Wizshade, first of his kind. I've never heard that term used before.
Oh, a Wizshade is a from Spelljammer.
Okay. Okay.
There
Okay,
are lots
all
of them
together now,
sprinkled around.
internet. Spelljammer confirmed.
Free the gift.
I didn't say it. I did not say it. Let the record show.
I thought it
Oh
was
my
plain
God.
jammer. I saw that the other day, like on the first.
Plain jammer.
Plain jammer.
Ed, did you make up
Derek,
which shades or
behave.
did you adapt them?
No. Wizshades were created by someone at TSR, but they created Wizshades from something in my notes, or I presume they saw those notes about what could happen to a sort of non-ghost but ghost appearing wizard type monster. And they just, I didn't come up with the name Wizshade or how it worked, but there's enough similarity in the physical descriptions that I said, oh yeah, they read my notes. Maybe I'm wrong about that, But no, I did not come up with them. They appeared in that. Remember that was in the era where monsters came in loosely 3-ring sheets, and it appeared in one of those 3-ring sheets, and I went, oh, This is cool and deployable, like Clockwork Horrors. I'm going to use them right away.
And if memory serves correctly, I think the Spelljammer Monsters Compendium pages, that was just kind of a full design crew freelance project. So we had the money for the TSR
The TSR
party,
party.
the Gen Con.
Yes.
So I couldn't tell you who exactly is responsible for it, but yeah.
Yeah, but Stephen, we always knew that they always threw money at you when you did a project.
Not enough. Never enough.
Wait, can we talk full color pictures and
We were paid enough money so we wouldn't be arrested upon all the exposure we were getting.
Yes, yes. You had to pay for the TSR staff party somehow.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So questions. We've got some questions.
yeah?
We'll go back to we just did a big one from Candlekeep. So let's do one from the chat. Gareth Garford asked, where was the mountain abode of Zentul? And ditto for Greenstone Keep, where the Red Wizard Alael Thung had held the book for a while, was slain. Many thanks.
I think I've asked this of Ed before.
Have you?
Yep.
I'm just trying to find my
Yes.
email.
This man's searchable database. Huge searchable database.
Yeah, he is. He has about 2 gigs of storage, I think.
And up will come the NDA.
Trying to find it. I might have shoved it in my
Careful.
somewhere.
Well,
in my thing.
There's
Down
a little
under.
bit, George, there's a little bit in Volo's Guide to All Things Magical too.
and to fill the dead air. Dun, 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 dun,
No,
dun,
it's not
dun,
coming
dun,
up, but I could
dun,
have sworn
dun.
I asked it.
Well, you keep looking, George. I actually have another
I'll
question.
keep looking. You guys soft
Yeah,
shoe
yeah.
shuffle for
Yeah, no, it's okay. I got another question here from earlier. I think it was Barbarous. This kind of tied into Stephen's question earlier, and I meant to get to it before we got too far away. But FRC33E Dalelands population lists something like 36,000 drow, and in Cormanther 72,000. Are those really surface numbers or all underground? Because he had 600,000 people, I think, listed in there for the Dalelands, and the book listed like 6% drow.
So what I always suspected was the census taker who used to work in the Forest of Mir back in the Empires of Sands days in FR3, who counted 80,000 drow, moved on in 3rd edition to Cormanther. But no, there's probably a real answer.
Remember, FR3 also had electrum mines, so there's a little bit of
There's such a thing, Stephen. It's when your gold mine is really close to your silver mine.
and you
That's
tried
right.
dragon fire to mix them together. Yeah, I know. That's the excuse I came up with.
And love each other very much.
That's right. And they have kids. Well, Ed, is there an answer for that?
NDA.
Oh,
Ah,
as he swings the
You've
NDA
been-
hammer.
You've been thwarted already, George.
Damn.
yeah.
You can stop looking now.
No, George will find something and make it up.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
looking.
Yeah, come on.
Anyway, let's keep talking about stuff. I've got so many emails from Ed.
Yeah, well.
I could be here all week.
No.
Try the veal.
Try the meal.
I got a couple of related questions. The first is that when was Miramidra founded? And then second one has to do with the Dark Court slaughter and the names of the whether there are clan names for the Elven and Dwarven leaders that were wiped out there.
I'm going to let George take a first crack at that.
Sorry, I missed the first bit of that. What was?
When was
when wa-
Miramidra founded?
Yeah, it's a good question. No, it is. I think it's a really
agree.
good question. The Drow have been around in the lands under Shadow for a long,
just
long
call
time.
them the lands down under, George.
From minus,
They're never
You-
going to
you-
let you live it down, George.
you know that deep bears are actually drop bears. Everyone knows that. They've just spelt it in all the products. No, we know that the Drow are active from as early as minus 4,000 Dale Reckoning. Now, I personally don't think that Mayor Midra was that old. I think that the Drow realm that currently is unnamed, although I'm sure Ed's got a name squirreled away somewhere, was named something else. But then when they had their issues and their troubles, and there was the fall of the Twisted Tower, and there's been many times when the elves of Corman Thea attacked them and drove them away, and etc. etc. I think that was the beginning of the end. So I don't actually think that Mary Midra is that old, although it probably was an outpost, a satellite city of this much larger Drow kingdom that basically stood under the Dalelands and the eastern edge of Anarok. So a founding date. I'm tempted to say around the fall of the Twisted Tower. So we're talking about the 800s Dale Reckoning. So it's probably been around for 5 centuries or so before it was wiped out by brave adventurers and fire giants and all sorts of stuff in the very, very difficult City of the Spider Queen adventure, which reminds me a lot of the stuff that Eric runs, Deadly.
Hey,
So,
although I'm not sure if I agree, because it could be older than that. So if you look at
No.
Shadowdale Scouring of the Land,
Yeah, I'm looking for the reference myself.
yeah, but that's stuff you made up, and so I'm not sure that's right.
yeah,
But it's been fired from the canon.
No,
That's
that's
right.
So Ed, that thing you sent, can I go post that now?
Sure.
Okay.
yeah. So the only thing I would say, George, is what I'd have to double check. I actually like your logic a lot. And the idea of rather than making, because we've got a lot of city states in the north, and we kind of tried to explain how most of them were of the Ilithari tradition, but some of them were from the Miratari tradition. We did that recently in Havens of Miratar on DM's Guild. But it's kind of cool to think that the Dalelands might be more of a realm rather than a bunch of city states, like George was indicating. What I have to try to recall, and I'm a little vague on this, is in one of Stephen's products, I think it was either Cormanthier or Fall of Mithranor, he alluded to House Derniv, which which was a Drow house that had a couple roles, and I can't remember if we said explicitly they were in Mare Midra or not. But they were involved in the whole Shadowdale, coming and going from the lands down under. So I'm trying to remember the exact history there. So I'd have to go back and compare Shadowdale to Cormanthier to the City of the Spider Queen to see if it'll still work to be that young or if it has to be a little older.
No, I think it is that old because you latched onto the only Drow city mentioned in the Realms lore in that region, and of course stuck it into the House Derniv write up. So no, you have Mare Midra around in minus 2600, so it's older than that.
So it could be, but then the question, I think your idea still holds though, George. If I pushed it back that far, that doesn't mean it pushes it all the way back to the Dark Court slaughter. And what you could have is it's a remnant of a larger realm that was part of that Dark Court slaughter. That maybe is one of the surviving pieces. There's also another Drow city underneath the Moon Sea whose name is escaping me at the moment. And that could have been part of that same tradition or same culture as well.
Yeah, there's certainly Drow underneath the Moon Sea. I'm not sure they've ever actually had it been given a name as such, but
I thought I did
recall
somewhere,
offhand.
but I can't remember.
The Dark Court slaughter is an interesting one because it involves Duergar, and there's no mention of Duergar that early. In fact, it's a little bit problematic, I think, in terms of the timing, because we have House Duergar. The Duergar in the realms become Duergar because of Barrakur in High Shanatar coming under the control of the Illithids of Orindal, which is right under the Shining Plains, just west of the Vilhom. And that's happens in the -8,000 or so Dale Reckoning. And the Dark Court slaughter is 4,000 years later. How do they get from there to there? I mean, I suppose when they escaped from the Illithids, they must have headed north and east and formed some Duergar realm that we've never heard of or never named, somewhere beneath the Dalelands, somewhere there. But that's more realms lore that we have to explore.
For a lack of
Very
that,
awesome.
I've gone through all the questions that we've gotten so far.
We asked the Lord Warngren question.
No, we did not.
See, I like this era, so I'm gonna ask it, and you guys can all jump in on it because I'd like to hear as many people have a take on this as possible.
I'm sure it's going to be NDA, but go right ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying to squeeze it out. Let's see what we got. What happened to Lord Warngren, the ruler of Featherdale, after the time of troubles? And is there nothing at all to speak on?
died of old age 40 years after the fact. That's the easy answer.
Well,
It's not satisfying, but it happens. You know.
Let me just look up my lineage of Warngren. No, he gave up the lordship to Azalar Falconhand, didn't he? Didn't you do that, Eric?
Right.
I'm not sure that I think he was still around. I'm trying to remember now because I don't have Shadowdale in front of me, but I think he was still around in Shadowdale scouring in the land in 1373 or 74. I had one of the lords.
You had him enspelled. You had him charmed or something or other.
Yeah, he was charmed in that module. So I think it's pretty determined up till then. And I did an article in Dragon 350 or 354 that kind of talked about the history in 1374, although I don't know if I mentioned him. But I'm not sure what's been said about him after that date.
And that's an NDA, right?
It is. And I don't know why it is, because I don't know whether it was a books department plan project that, of course, died when the decision was made to discontinue the book line and lay off or reassign all the in-house people, or whether it was a game department, perhaps an exterior license product, but they intended to do something with Warngrim. Warngrim as the ex-lord, now adventurer, so he could be deployed in other ways rather than just sitting on a throne in Shadowdale and having problems come to his door. He could be a roving adventurer. He could be more mobile, and that was an in-house Wizards of the Coast thing. And I don't know why. They just said, don't talk about him, okay? Because we have plans. And when they say things like that, about 70 to 75% of them, for whatever reason, never come to fruition. Either the license falls through, or they give the rights to a license holder who then changes their mind about the story they can tell, whether it's for a computer game or a piece of fiction in another format or a movie or whatever it is they're planning. It never goes there. Plans change, and that character ends up on the cutting room floor. So they're still NDA'd, and you don't necessarily know why. Now, one of the things we have covered in Canon Realms lore is the leadership of the Dale going on after that through various female hands. And that's been covered on Twitter and in various references in web columns. at the Wizards website, which may no longer be easily found in some cases, or in Question Sins.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure in Shatterdale, Eric's Shatterdale 3rd edition adventure, he has Azalar Falcon. Morgrim resigns the
Yes.
lordship.
Yeah,
Mhm.
He was an NPC in your campaign anyway, wasn't he?
that's right. Warngren and
yeah.
Cather. Yep. Hmm.
Yeah, and yeah, on page 124 of the decision, of the module, yeah, we have a range of choices, but I would have thought the obvious one is for Azalar Falconhand to become the Lord of Shatterdale that time onwards. So what happened to Morgrim
I would
after
agree
that?
with you on. I would agree with you, George. That's a logical choice.
Yeah, but you know, he could just go into retirement and not do much, or head back. He might even head back to Waterdeep. Who knows? But
Yeah, I am now hunting for some back references to see if it's okay. There we go. Addie Ulfor became Lady of Shadowdale when Azalar Falconhand, Lord Azalar Falconhand, retired. I tweeted about that on December 4th of 2017, and then Addie,
she in 1487 she dies in
And-
battle with Foltanthar, and then Sword
Kara
Commander
Solwood.
Kara Solwood, who
Yep.
one assumes is Dost's
Yep, Douse,
granddaughter, I would
Yep.
assume. Yeah.
Yep.
So we've got a new Lord of Shatterdale in 1487.
Yeah.
And Azalar Falconhand retires in 1459, Dale Reckoning. So
yeah, and I'm just
and
checking.
yeah, and I'm pretty sure, yeah, Shadowdale Scouring the Land makes it pretty clear that it is assumed that Lord Morgrim survives, resigns his lordship, and heads east to rejoin the Knights of Mithranor, and that Azalar Falconhand is installed as a new Lord of Shatterdale.
Yeah, and grand history confirms that the canon answer is that Azalar becomes the Lord of
Yeah.
Shadow.
Yeah.
And there's a little sidebar on page 144 of the Shatterdale Adventure, which talks about where the knights have gone and what they're doing and bits and pieces. So, yeah.
Yeah, but I do recall that he joined the steadily growing ranks of the people, characters within the realms, some of them not human, you know, like beholders and dragons and so on, who I was quietly asked, stop talking about them, don't mention them again, because they could be handed to a licensee. You know, they could be something else. So you don't want to have a contradiction because I or somebody else has said something about them, and then somebody who's designing a lunch bucket and paying a licensing fee for it does something else with them. You know, and you actually see that still in 5th edition. You see little dice sets with encounter cards and so on coming out for each new mega adventure, like Storm King's Thunder or whatever. And that is within that product. There could, if you don't buy that product, you aren't aware that there certain characters are used and named, and we add a little bit to their history. For in certain things, if they're going to be used by somebody else, and when Steven was Realms Traffic Cop back in the day, that was one of the things you had to make sure that books, games, and somebody else didn't all do something with the same character at the same time, or you have the 3 fates of Alucer and Acacia, except by the end of it there were 5 fates for you just want to avoid having contradictions introduced in canon because the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. That happened also with Lord Obold Many Arrows and stuff in Silver Marches, because Bob was at work on a novel at the time, and Jason Carl and I were at work on Silver Marches, and Rich Baker was our editor, and that was games, and Bob was over in books, and the two did not talk to each other. And you try and avoid all that, and the way they worked out for avoiding that increasing in the future was, hey, Ed, don't talk about this character. So for instance, I've been told for quite a while not to talk about Xanathar. Why? Well, out comes Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and Xanathar is in Waterdeep Dragon Heist. Ah, that's why.
Oh, the terrible, terrible fate of ending up being retconned due to a lunch bucket. I could only imagine.
Well, you see, I was almost used to that because when I was attending,
I know
high
you
school,
tell
we had
that part
lunch
of the
buckets.
story so easily.
Uh-huh.
But as
And
a
he's
kid
not
going
wrong.
to school,
Yeah.
yeah, we had lunch buckets. And I remember that they just changed to plastic from metal. I mean, you could still get metal ones, but they were expensive.
Mm.
So all the kids got cheapy plastic ones, which meant your thermos broke every so often. Because if you dropped the lunch bucket, there was no cushioning for the thermos
Yeah.
at all.
Oh, mine shattered every time.
Yeah, exactly. So, I sort of go, oh, yeah, I'm used to that. Everything breaks because of the lunch bucket. And you open the lunch bucket, and what's inside is disappointing.
Mm.
Sardine sandwiches again.
I like sardines.
Who the hell was packing your sandwiches?
My Aunt Clara. You see, all the
Ah.
other kids in class got cool stuff like, burgers from McDonald's and stuff. And
Well, their
Aunt
parents
Clara,
didn't care about them.
Aunt Clara had been through 2 world wars and a depression,
Mm.
and she fed you on the sort of stuff. I mean, Aunt Clara was one of these wonderful women. She'd buy pork chops and she'd cut the fat rind off it, and then she'd eat the fat rind as candy for herself. And you'd go, ugh. But you see, when you realize when you lived through 2 world wars and the depression, fat was something you never got. So it was a treat.
Mm.
So we were eating weird stuff. But it was actually a popular household to come to because people who were tired of Pop-Tarts that half melted in the toaster and half froze would come to our house because, hey, you get real food at your house. And Aunt Claire just didn't tell them what they were eating. Oh, that's the pig strutters. But you don't say that to the little kid.
Now you're making me hungry, Ed. Stop.
Yeah, tripe.
I actually really love all that kind of food. So
Yeah. And Aunt Clara
so do
used to
I.
eat bone marrow. She used to take a hot wire and shove it through the bones and push the marrow out onto a piece of toast.
Wow.
And yeah, all the fun stuff. Anyway, so yeah, lunch bucket letdown is something I was used to from a young age. So I could,
So somebody asked you, how'd your character die? Did they battle a lich? Did they die killing a dragon? No, they were squashed onto a lunch bucket.
that's right. No, they choked on bone marrow, pushed out onto a piece of bread.
Yeah.
From a sense of scale, there ought to be a market for dragon bone marrow,
Ooh,
Oh yeah.
you would think.
it'd be
Wow.
expensive too, wouldn't it?
That'd be a delicacy.
Which
That
that
would
was an
be-
argument I lost when I was when they were still talking the first Draconomicon. I said
Yes.
it really ought to be at least 6 pages of this is what a hunter will tell you can do with the dragon's carcass and how you make money off of it.
Right.
But I was overruled because I'd only been with the company about 4 months at the time.
Mm.
Are you going to tell the story about the dragon sex life and the
Not
12
I,
pages?
said the duck. You go right ahead.
No, I was not in
Oh,
house.
Come
I
on,
heard about it
Stephen.
afterwards.
Come on, Stephen.
I'm trying to remember the story, but
Dory was involved.
yeah,
One
was
of
that
the-
Dragon Mountain?
I think it was Dragon Mountain, not Dragon.
Yeah, and something to do with when copulating dragons would just fly.
Yeah, it was
Straight
12
up,
pages on
and,
dragon sex.
Yeah.
They
Why,
got
oh, why
taken-
did they ever exit?
I think I've expunged it from my memory banks just for my own sanity. But I do believe it involved a lot of velocity and a lot of noise.
Splat!
that's what the Field of the Dead really is, right?
No.
No. Okay.
No, it is too much. Let me sum up.
Let me sum. Oh wow. I do have one that's a little off topic here, if you don't mind answering. It's a Undermountain question.
Yeah, that's connected to
I
the
might
portals
answer
if
it.
you
Yeah.
walk far enough.
If you dig a tunnel straight east, I guess, and then up.
Sure, there's a portal or three that leads
Yeah,
to the
there, if
mountains
you take
and
the right
hills.
portal, yeah.
That's true. That's true. Escape from Undermountain by Mark Antony, the prologue, the Third Eye of Savras, and Hall of Crashing Pillars. On what level of Undermountain is that encounter located?
Level 1. Oh yeah.
Everything
Okay,
on
thank you.
level
Next
1.
question.
Yeah.
There's lots of really deadly stuff on level 1. It's
Mhm.
just not right near where the Yawning Portal's shaft goes down.
Right. Yeah.
It's
And
in
then there was some undeveloped stuff on level 2, and then all my really crazy stuff, like the Ring of Death, which is all Death Tyrants and Beholders and stuff, was on
Mhm.
level 3.
Mhm.
Because I was at that point delaying the company of crazed venturers from going deeper by alternatively giving them things that would make them run away and other things
If they're
that would make them,
smart.
yeah, if they're smart, which they
Yeah.
weren't, being adventurers. And the other thing was everyone loves a mystery. So I was laying all these mysterious things that tied back to stuff on the surface. So they were starting to get suspicious of all these different guilds and all these different noble families and all these different wealthy, successful, wannabe noble merchants, the really successful, wealthy guys. The Elon Musks of Waterdeep, they were getting potential ties to stuff down in Undermountain and stuff in Skullport. And they were going, oh, and we were at that stage, and that's when they decided through a series of circumstances to start a new campaign, and everything happened with so we never really pursued that. So when Undermountain had to be turned over as a product, like everything else, it had to be distilled from a quart into a pint pot in about 3 months. And a lot of that time, the slowest thing of any product is art and mapping. Because and which is why a lot of Empire of the Petal Throne and so on maps got repurposed, because we had to do a giant dungeon without having time to wade through all of Eddie's notes of his giant dungeon, because it had to be put in the box. And this was not a product that at the time was expected to be the success it was.
Right.
And in fact, certain people in the company were trying to shoot it down. Oh, this is going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
And then
My boss at the time swore that it was just going to be a dog, and
yes,
Jeff backed us. And it was the only time in my professional career that I had a boss show up in my cube and apologize for doubting us, because the first printing of the Ruins of Undermountain box sold out in less than 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then it just kept going back
It-
to print.
it-
Back to print.
I think it went through at least 5 printings, and I'll be damned why none of them ever obeyed the reprint where I asked them to take a particular illo and turn it the correct way around. It was wrong from the first printing all the way through. There's a
Shows you how
particular
thirsty we
picture
were
somewhere in
for
the
it.
latter third of the book where there's bodies hanging in webbing, except they're hanging upward.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
The way the illo is set up.
Claws of the Sunsets.
Yes.
It shows you how
Lots of the
thirsty
sunset.
everybody was for more games like that, and there still are.
Yeah. I still remember the glee that Dave Sutherland had showing me the original maps of those. It's like, oh yeah, let me show you. And yeah, I was playing this with Luke Gygax and all that, and he died here, and then he died over here, and then he died over here. And but the one that still sticks with me is one point he's like, okay, we're just about done with these maps, but I need to walk you through something. So he's like, okay, here's our base level. Now you go down 30 feet, you go down another 20, and he's walking me through all the staircases on, I think, level 2 or 3. And he's like, okay, then you get to this door. The doorway opens 75 feet above the floor of this room. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. That is exactly what Halaster would do.
Oh,
So,
speaking of
yeah.
Halaster,
I miss
Really?
Dave, but yeah, that was a good product and a good time.
speaking
So-
of Halaster, Ed, did you hear Aaron's new name for Halaster?
Yeah, I think
That-
so on Discord. Yeah, but go ahead.
So Aaron Evans and B. Dave Walters do a show every Monday called Champions of Lore for CNE Games. That's the company that runs Idle Champions of the Realms. And but she also was doing for a few weeks because her characters Farida and Havilar in the game, they were doing a they were doing a live play. I think it was on Champions of Lore though that she was doing a recap as Havilar and of the game, and trying to recall Halaster's name and called him Alabaster Booty Clap.
Alabaster booty clap.
Yes.
Oh
Alabaster
my.
Booty
Wow.
Clap.
Pay for that one.
I will share the
Oh,
the
That's a
Oh,
keeper.
dear.
clip of that in the Twitch chat.
And
Um,
I can just imagine Tetsalana coming back to her bedchamber, weary and tired, sitting down on the edge of the bed, pulling her boots off, and then she goes, "Oh," and leans back on the bed, and there's somebody in it already. And she goes, "Bah!" and this voice says, "Hi, Alabaster Booty Clap at your service."
Oh, jeez.
And
Oh.
she touched down once or twice as she fled.
Oh my God! Here's another question here from Gang Nail. Any more lore on Alakar's lair, and what is the history there? Would the old sage of Shaldale not know it's in the area early on?
Oh yeah. Elminster was well aware it was there. People have to get it out of their heads that Elminster is a do-gooder and replace that with the idea that Elminster is a chosen of Mystra and does what Mystra wants him to do. You might recall that Alakar's lair is on the far side of something called the Grinding Gulf. And the Grinding Gulf is this underground subterranean crevasse with lots of little, for want of a better term, let's call them asteroids, whizzing around, ricocheting off each other. Something odd to find underground in a pastoral farming dale, isn't it? It is a strange magical effect. And without telling him much about it at the time, he's since learned much more. Mystra wanted it kept there. And if Alakar was going to layer on the far side of it, that was fine. What shouldn't happen is that adventurers shouldn't, or anybody else, harpers or anybody else, shouldn't blunder, or the elves, shouldn't blunder in there and try and take care of Alakar at the cost of disturbing the Grinding Gulf. So the Grinding Gulf was a magical effect that was associated with something else that Mystra very much wanted protected. the Grinding Gulf was one of the major weave anchors because it was a kinetic thing as opposed to being a stationary target. It was a great balancer in the same way that you can spin a gyroscope and you can bleed off a lot of energy, or you can keep momentum going by speeding it up or whatever. So it becomes a nice sync, like a spell engine spell. So the Grinding Gulf had a utility, even though that wasn't its original purpose, which remains NDA.
Of course.
By then, Mystra was using it as an ancillary use for that, and therefore that's why Alocar's lair was undisturbed.
That's really interesting because um, it adds a real nuance to something we put in Shadowdale, Scouring of the Land, where there is the House of the Night, a temple of Shar directly below the Grinding Gulf, around the time that Shar is trying to, build up her silly shadow weave kind of thing, in emulation of Mystra, and so that's really interesting. If it's a weave anchor, that adds a whole nother dimension to that environment. And so for folks who don't know, we played off of the original write-up, which was in the original Lords of Darkness, I think. Do I have that right?
Yes. Yeah. REF 5, Lords of Darkness.
REF 5, yeah, first edition collection adventure that has the first appearance of the Saruk, if I remember, although they're not named that, and also had Alacar and had a couple other really cool adventures as well. So there was that adventure, and then we played on it again. But that making it a weave anchor is something I never really suspected, but that's a really cool thing.
Well, you see, you have to have reasons, not just for why is something still there, as to why is it still there for your adventurers to blunder into it now? Why hasn't somebody taken care of it so already? And Shadowdale is one of the worst places in the realms for that, because you have these Drow, and you have Elminster, and you have Selûne, and you have Storm, and you have the Temple in the Sky not too far away, and you have all this stuff. And okay, why hasn't this powder keg erupted into open warfare before? Why now? So I had to come up with things that, why would they be undisturbed?
I love it.
The motto Eric lives his life by. Why now?
And by the way,
Why
Why
now?
now? Exactly.
for any of you out there in online land who are planning your next Hollywood movie, plotting it, or your next streaming TV series, or your next 14-volume doorstopper fantasy epic novels, ask yourself this: why hasn't the thing that is fated to save the world happened before? Why is it waiting for your adventurers in the book or on the screen in front of you? Why is it now? And make it a reason that isn't a prophecy. Because if it's a prophecy, then why hasn't the King Herod thing happened? As in, oh, the prophecy says that this young silver-haired waif will arise in Zoblobville and save the world. Okay, kill all young silver-haired waifs that are ever born anywhere near, why hasn't that happened? So you work it out. You have to come out with a reason and make it a good one, and that will improve the plot of your tale immeasurably.
Right.
If you can work out a why it hasn't happened yet, then all of a sudden everything is way more realistic, and the stakes are really higher, instead of just, oh my goodness, the molecular thwangulator in the hands of a mortal. The universe is doomed. Sorry, that was a not Brand X Silver Surfer Galactus reference that I just couldn't. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh, was that secret? Darn.
And
I think
people
this
get
speaks to
after me
something-
about the Year of the Scarlet Witch. Come on.
I think what Ed was just talking about though speaks to something that we talk about with the realms all the time, in that it's not a stage waiting for your player characters to step onto, and then suddenly the action starts. You know, the one of the core conceits of the realms is that things are always moving, things are always happening. If something happened something didn't happen last year that was supposed to happen, there has to be a reason why it didn't happen. If you start your campaign in 1360 instead of 1358, something happened in those intervening 2 years that moved the plot along. And so when your players arrive, for whatever reason, there's been motion, there's been a natural evolution of events, because the needs and the wants and the actions of the player characters are not the only ones that have an effect on the world. That the whole point of the Forgotten Realms is that every shopkeep and innkeeper and soldier and hedge wizard has just as much effect on the world as the player characters. And because if they don't, then the world isn't really real. It's just it's all sand, and the only toys that matter are the ones in your hands. And that automatically lowers the stakes for the players, because then they don't have to care about the sand. You know, you knock down the sandcastle, well, we can always build one tomorrow. But if they're more real, I think it's automatically more engaging. It's immediately more immersive. And I think that's what makes the realm such an enduring setting, is that such care has been taken over many years to make that real.
Right.
And one of the ways, I think Brian is right. One of the ways to do that, if you're sketching out a campaign, is to say, even before you get to the NPC, start with the groups, right? So pick 5 or 6 groups that are active in the area. Think through what each of those groups wants in a vacuum, right? Where are they at now in their plan for world domination, and what's left to do in their plan for world domination, right? So they're on a trajectory, and then there's another group on a different trajectory. And those groups, presumably, if their campaign's going to be fun, some of their trajectories, they both can't win, right? And so there's clashes that are coming between these different groups. And then your party, you know, they're almost like this little pool ball, you know, like the cue ball running around in the middle of all these groups but you know, don't look at it as a static pool table where all the groups are in one spot. They're all moving, right? And that's when you shoot your white cue ball. And, you know, who knows who it's going to bounce off of hit and how it's going to modify those trajectories. But if you know where the groups are coming from and theoretically what they'd like to acquire and the means that they're willing to do it, then that, you know, as the players bump into them, it gets more and more complicated and more fun.
And in the case of certain campaigns, the player characters can end up just kind of becoming the squished oil between the two power groups.
There's more than 2, Stephen. Like, for instance, if you're running a campaign in the Deseret River Valley, you might piss off 2 different cells of the Dragon Cult. You might piss off
the Uthgard.
You might piss off the Church of Shar. You might push off a bunch of giants. You might, you know, the Arcane Brotherhood. You've got to think through, but the group shouldn't show up randomly either. I think it's really important that they have a place they're coming from and a place they're going to, and your players are the chaos that's interfering with their grand plans.
Right.
We won't be forgotten, but we probably won't survive.
Oh my God. That is true. Okay, we have another question here. And it is, what troubles, quests, or campaigns can high-level characters, 10 to 15th level, get involved in the Dales? And doesn't matter which era.
What can't you get involved in?
Yeah. Well, one of the ones right now, if you go like the late 1490s, after the end of the events of the Herald, there's a certain city pancaking on top of the central business district of a certain other city.
Yeah.
So there's a power vacuum. And at the same time, you have a fairly new regime in Hillsfar. You have the Zentrim trying to present a different face to the world. The pancaking of that one city has freed Sembia from the jackboot that has been on its neck and throat for the last little while, and they are the players around it. And Cormyr is still and always there and very interested in keeping its interests in the Dales, unimpaired by these other groups, the Zentrim, the Sembians, Hillsfar. So your player characters could be caught in the middle of everybody trying to rush in and fill the power vacuum. And if there's going to be any rebuilding of the City of Song, they could be hired by the elves. They could be hired by any one of those groups, Cormyr, Hillsfar, the Zentrim, Sembia. They could be hired by somebody else, like, say, an independent Sembian who's wealthy and has his or her own estate in the north of Sembia, but feels frozen out of the power structure in Sembia. Well, why not I move in here? This is my chance. And then, of course, you can add all the leavening of the same sort of a dispossessed younger son in Waterdeep of a noble family. Well, go out and make your fortune in the world, son. Here's the equivalent of several $1 million, but just get out of my hair. And the Red Wizards of Thay trying to establish an enclave. And, and these are the ping pong balls bouncing all over the table. And your player characters are caught in the middle, as Stephen just put it.
And did you hear that a Yaktu's Vim is walking around again?
Yes.
Selling Girl Scout cookies.
That's right. That's right.
You want the green ones?
Okay, and we have another one here, Luca Trupa. Speaking of the Sage of Shadowdale, is it in the cards that their gender fluidity, double identity as Elmara, as well as sharing the body with the symbol of late, that's been brought up in some Twitter answers, gets played up in the future?
It would be a very logical, because we've set it up that way, and welcome thing to do. Why not? And it's one more thing to explore. One of the cool things about the realms is any new idea for a story that isn't going to upset the apple cart by everybody acting out of character and it not being the realms just to tell your new story idea. Like, okay, let's have a race of giant talking dinosaurs who suddenly rule all of the Moonsea area. That would sort of crash into all the stuff we set up. But if it's not going to be something that crashes into and doesn't fit with, it's always interesting to explore new stories. And the new stories in the realms shouldn't be, and this is the mistake we can gather by looking at mega adventures now in 5e and the novels in earlier eras, that they're always grand, huge, world shaking. They should always be looking over the shoulders of individual characters, sentient beings living their lives in the realms. And that would be just one more thing to add to the mix. What's it like? It's just another storytelling opportunity. It's not take over or change the realms. It's just, hey, look, I've now got another arrow in the quiver, and it looks different from all the other arrows. What does it do?
Right.
What
It's
stories
been
can we
avoided,
tell?
though. It seems to be it's been avoided in the past. So it'll be something nice just to see now.
And of course, in a truly pragmatic real world thing, it is a chance, if you don't blow it, to grow your audience and make new people interested.
Right. No,
And that's
exactly.
It has to be not blow it, because you don't want to win a new audience at the expense of losing an old one. That's
true.
Yeah, but if done properly, it could be great.
Right.
So do it. Try it.
Just to
absolutely.
Just to add a little bit to that, in part because of the era in which they were published, and in part because of large publishing companies moving much slower than general society. What has been printed for the realms has done generally a poor job at representing what we would call trans or intersex folks, people who are gender nonconforming or of non-binary genders, who absolutely exist in the Forgotten Realms in the same kind of proportions that they exist in the real world. The humanity in the realms reflects the humanity that we know it. It's not just because it's a magical world that these people don't exist, despite what some internet trolls might claim. And I think, while I don't necessarily think that Elminster, Elmaro would be the ideal vehicle to explore that, because it kind of feels like almost using an established character and honing in on a very specific part of their background rather than having it be a natural story. But also, more importantly, and this is no offense to Ed, this is not a story that Ed should be telling.
Right.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Ed doesn't know anything about being gender nonconforming from his personal life. Ed doesn't know anything about, gender transition personally. He's not gone through those experiences, and that's the flip side. The other side of the point is that, in general, the Realms Publishing hasn't done a good job of bringing in voices to tell their own stories. And so, while I would hope that we would get more stories generally for the Forgotten Realms, my attached hope, my corollary hope, is that we'd also get a greater variety of people to be able to tell those stories.
Right. No, absolutely. I just want to make a quick announcement that we're actually going to be ending a little early tonight. Ed has to go in a few minutes, about 15 minutes, and so to Curry also. We can, if you other guys want to stay, we can stay longer. That's okay. But I just want to let everybody know, if you have a question for Ed, that he's going to be bowing out here in about 15 minutes. So, and Curry as well. So.
Mhm. And Brian, to supplement what you were saying, it's one thing that I've been gone from Wizards for 20 years now.
Wow.
And so it's but when I was there and working with the Realms, the attitude was always, any story you want to tell that is fantastical in any way, there's a place in the Realms for it somewhere. And it's just a matter of finding where it is. The other thing that was, with when Ed was talking in regard to the grand epic stories, and honestly, the Realms is better suited for Robert E. Howard and Fritz Lieber level stories.
Yep.
They're focused, they're small, and they're personal. They're not the Dragonlance quest. They're not the grand epics. They're not always going to be the threat from the sea. It's better off being a standalone novella or a short story than it is the grand sweeping epic. It's not everything should be the Lord of the Rings, because frankly, that gets tiresome. There's a lot more people than there are legends and heroes. And so let's tell their stories better.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
One thing I would add to what was the earlier question that Brian ably answered is, while Ed is not necessarily the one, or neither am I or some of the others, to tell certain stories, some people make up new characters and they put them in the Realms, and that's absolutely wonderful. And others get hung up on working with ones that are in the published lore as well. That tends to be my problem. But what I would say is that Ed Barry's
admitting it's a problem is the first step.
What I would say is Ed Barry's little things you can build on all over the place. And then with respect to like that question, two examples that come to my mind. One is front and center in Volo's Guide to the North, Tomb of the Maiden King. Go, tell us what that story is about. Ed adds characters, like in Code of the Harpers, there was a obscure character named Tracker in Asgore. These are characters, when you look at them, and if you think twice, you can build them into your story. So Ed has been leaving little breadcrumbs to build off of all over the place, and I would encourage people to look for them and play with them. So that was just a little bit more.
Yes, Curry.
Got a little bit of a spin-off in the same vein. Ed has always made it a pretty strong point, and you guys have as well, about making the everyman character a viable color in the story. We recently did an episode of Ed's first story of One Comes Unheralded to Zerta. So just
Yep.
follow me on this question. Ed, one, was Beldrum Taruster the very first everyman? And two, was he ever heard from again?
He
That's
was
right.
he was the very first everyman that I put into a published realm story, as opposed to stuff I was noodling around with just for me. Okay. And by published, I meant I typed it all the way up and I gave it to my dad, and he took it off to his friends at work. And they all enjoyed it and came back and said, okay, write another one, sort of thing. So he was the first quote published. Okay. And I did write one other thing that happened to him.
Okay.
Which never saw the light of day, wider than my own thing, where he went back. No. And it was called his bad day.
Oh.
It was a bad day at work.
Poor guy.
Because he owns a shop, and everything goes wrong. Okay, and he feels angry, sad, tired, and it's like the gods are conspiring against me. Everything is going wrong. Why don't I go home and eat worms, sort of thing, that sort of thing. And he's closing the door, and just as he's closing the door, an adventurer falls through it, and it's a young half elf woman, and she has 3 arrows in her back.
Oh wow.
And she goes, 8, and he looks at her. He doesn't know what to do. I mean, he's not a healer or anything, and he doesn't. And she was just a little water, just a little, the cleanest water you have, the coldest water you have. And he runs and gets it, and she drinks it, and then she says thank you and dies. She just wanted to drink the water before she died.
Wow.
And he doesn't know what to do, doesn't know her name. But of course, he goes and gets his wife. He goes and gets his kids, and they give her the proper burial. And then he starts asking around who she was and where she was from. And then, of course, we leave him thinking, so my life could be much worse than it is. Look at this, And the other thing is, it leaves him thinking, who was she? I have to know. And like that little moment in Princess Bride, I have to know. Get used to being disappointed.
Right.
Because that was just leaving you with the realms as a bigger place. You will never get to the bottom of all them, which is something we can all identify with in our own lives. There's always somebody who has it worse, and you're never going to know everything there is to know about the world around you. You can get jaded and think and get peeved, particularly as you get older, because you can cynically predict what, say, a politician will do, and then they do it, and you go, but yet the world can still surprise you. And that's all I did with that little unfinished tale. He didn't do anything heroic.
Right.
He's everyman, but he did the right thing,
Yeah.
according to him. He did the decent thing. He doesn't know this person from Adam, but what do you do with somebody who's died in your arms? You give them a decent burial.
Right.
And then you try and get word to their folks. But to try and get word to their folks, you have to find out who they are. And of course, that's something he's going to find it very difficult to do. But he's going to spend his life doing it, not consuming him, just while running his shop. But he's never going to let it rest. The next merchant that comes to town, he goes, have you ever heard of a half elf? She was about yay tall, and it becomes one of those library jokes or bookstore jokes. I'm looking for a book. It's purple and it's about this thing. You don't have enough info to go on.
Full of
Yeah.
words.
But
It's over there on the purple shelf.
yeah. But he's never going to let it go. And you think he's not achieving anything, but never mind. He's doing what little he can. And you almost admire him the last you see of him, where you see him look up and go, did you ever meet a half elf? And you think this is completely pointless, but
Yeah.
he's going to keep at it.
That's his contribution. Yeah.
That's what the little man can do.
And
Yeah.
every time he passes by that grave, he'll think about her.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like that wonderful moment in the first Captain America movie, where Stanley Tucci playing the German scientist says, "Oh, we have so many big man fightings this war already. Perhaps it's time for the little guy." And it's that little guy moment.
Yeah.
Right. No, that's perfect because we're all NPCs in each other's story.
Yeah.
We all have a story to tell too. Have another question here, if you've got time, Ed. Do the Eldrith Veluthra exist in the Cormanther Forest in the current era?
Yes.
Ed, that was really good way
If
to
you
throw
look
your
closely
points.
underneath the City of Shade ruins, you can find a lot of them.
So I will remind everyone that Cormanthor, Greater Cormanthor, includes all the forests in Cormyr.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And Eldrith Veluthra absolutely are still operating in
Yep.
Halak, no question. They I'm sure they have some operations on the eastern side of the mountains now that Mithranor has been destroyed, because they're going to want to curtail human expansion into that area.
Yep.
Because that's what they do. But they've been operating nonstop in Cormyr this whole time, and that's technically Cormanthor. So yeah.
Nice.
Perfect. And I got one here. I'm not sure if anybody here watches Riverdale.
Nope.
Nobody. It's
I read the comics long ago and far away, but
Oh no! Luca Troops asked which Dale was most like the titular location in the hit 2017 teen drama series Riverdale. Don't know.
Gonna be a hard
don't
one
know.
to answer.
Yeah, but I always fall back to Ed, your original answer to those questions many podcasts back of
NDA.
Well, no.
Dear.
That's a more simple
All right,
question.
I couldn't
Simple
read
answer.
this.
That was a more simple answer. Steven, get out. No, I like your answer always that they're not don't correlate the realms with the real world. A lot of people try to do that a lot, and they're like, well, I think New York City is kind of like Waterdeep, and because no, it's not. It's Waterdeep and New York City. They're totally different. So I think that could be the answer for a lot of things. Is they're just don't try to make a real world location out of the realms.
Now, if it helps you as a dungeon master to understand the setting by using a real world comparison, by all means do it, but just don't trust in it. The realms doesn't work that way.
Right. Okay. Apparently,
One of the
Trooper was only kidding.
one of the way, but to answer seriously what Ed was saying, I mean, most of the big landmarks Ed created, obviously, and we've just gotten the chance to play in them. But my sense was always, some of the other designers, probably myself included, have made this mistake of taking one of them and making it really like a real world analog. But if the fundamental principle for that city or that town or that kingdom is something that doesn't exist in our world, then it's a lot easier to like borrow a little bit from some other cultures real world cultures that you can think of, to work them and weave them in. But rather than making your founding principle, oh, this is the Amazons, and then, adding a few things to it to try to make it different. If you start with something like the Red Woods of the Fae, right? Which are not something that is based in the real world. And then you add in some aspects of some real world cultures. I still think it stands alone and very unique in a much stronger way.
Right.
You know, Rashomon is another example like that. I don't know, Ed, if that fits with your philosophy.
Oh
or
yeah,
not, but
that does fit. And actually, there is a Rashomon DMs Guild product coming out that Joe Rasso is helming. I can talk about this because he mentioned it on his blog. So, and
Yeah, it's getting advertisements now.
yeah, excellent, good. And I wrote a forward for it in which I talked about how much I detailed it and how much people who were working in the realms, like Elaine Cunningham, ran with it. You know, and everything should be like that. Run with it and make it your own. But just and I know this is a truism that we all can get tired of because we hear it so often. Whiz bang magic that you just cast and it affects people doesn't exist in our real world. So, but it does in the realms thanks to the D&D game.
Mhm.
So everything's going to be different potentially. Things are going to work differently. So always bear that in mind so you don't get caught in the trap of, but stirrups weren't invented until this year, so they wouldn't have been, even hordes wouldn't have been. It's like, it's not.
Honestly, the only time that I found it even remotely useful to take any real world comparisons and say, this has elements of X or Y or Z. It's helpful in terms of building the background for and setting your stage. When I say that in the Lands of Intrigue, I say and Tethir are a lot like Moorish Spain, only because I need to give a quick shorthand for what does it smell like? What does it feel like? What does
Right.
some of the architecture look like? It's not a direct comparison historically or ethnically or anything like that. It's more just, I need to give you a little bit of a touchstone so I don't have to eat up the page count telling you all that stuff. You know, it's an easier shorthand. It is a cheat, I'll admit, but it's something that I use as a DM and as an author. You just, whatever you can do to speed along the story that you want to tell, use a shorthand to get past the other details that you need to.
So
Yeah, and that's always the best way to approach it. How do you help the dungeon master at the gaming table? If the dungeon master is tired, they worked all day, they've working with their buddies, it's their chance to have an adventure and play a game, and you just want them to have a chance to work in more adventure and do less. Well, the backstory I got to figure out now on the fly is you're just trying to cut that out and shortcut it into having more fun with your friends at the gaming table.
Yeah, but we've also seen the flip side of that problem.
Oh yeah,
where the shorthand
Yes.
becomes the basis for the culture, like
Yeah.
happened in Chisenta and in Unther.
Yeah.
And
Total mistake.
so you know, trying to condense a whole culture down into a sentence or two so that someone else can go, and you're thinking they're going to build, when really what happens is they copy.
Yeah.
That's happened in lots of different places all over the realms. I don't want to get into it because it has to go soon. But also we have a problem, and it's something I want to mention really briefly, in that when we as dungeon masters or as writers take too much influence from a real world culture, what we begin to say is, well, these people look like this real world culture, and they sound like this real world culture, and they eat like this real world culture, and they worship like this real world culture. The problem that we becomes that we start to become determinist. And we start to say, well, if ethnically you look like this, then this is what your beliefs are, this is what your food is like, this is what your religious systems look like, this is what your culture looks like. And that can become really problematic, especially if you're writing from a perspective that doesn't originally come from that culture. And so then you get the Karator problem.
Yeah.
Where it's not just okay, we tried to use this for a shorthand, but when it's read by someone who is descended from that culture or actively part of that culture, it ventures into the offensive. So yeah, I mean, for your own table, do what you need to do to, get to the story that you're telling. But if you're developing something that's bigger than just for your own table, bear that in mind.
Yeah. Very well said. Yeah.
Okay. So why don't we wrap it up here? Because I know Ed has to go in a few minutes, and Curry's fading on us there. The beard's heavy; he can't help it. Anything anybody want to say? Last things on anything you're working on, or? Or Ed'll just say NDA.
NDA. Oh boy, there are so many things I am working on, but I can start to spill beans about some of them because Alex has. I'm working on something to do with Thay.
Yes.
And Joe Rasso and his crew are working on something to do with Rashman. So there's two long neglected areas of the realms that are going to get a little love on the DM's Guild.
Nice.
And the Thay thing is with Alex Kammer?
Yes.
Yes. And Alan Patrick. Bing bing.
So yeah, no, those sound wonderful. I was going to add, so George and I have been putting a couple things on DM's Guild. We'll probably put a few more once we can kind of focus for more than a split second. That's all George's fault, not mine. I'm joking.
Take that line down, George.
But my hope is actually that we can start putting out some adventures set in the Desert River Valley in the not too distant future. If that play test doesn't prove to be a total disaster.
And one other thing I'd like to mention that isn't realms, that the Viking city I'm working on.
Oh yeah,
the Norns. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because it's medieval Dublin, or pre-medieval Dublin. It's when the Vikings really did historically conquer Dublin in the 800s AD. And they ruled it for about 7 years before they sort of got pushed out. But it's a fantasy version. And the nice thing is, one of the things I can't do is go, although I'm working on something, I can't go back to Waterdeep and detail it the way I'd like to. So what I'm going to try and do with Askleath, a much smaller city, is detail it down to the nines. And then it will become a living city in which Andrew Volkoskas, who created Fate of the Norns, and his friends who want to write and design with him will go on putting out adventures, side adventures, and new characters. So it will become a living city the way that the old RPGA living city. But you will get a box set in which you know something about somebody who lives in just about every building in the city. And you can just take the city and file off the Viking names, because the names are either Celtic, Hibernian, i.e. Irish, or they're Norse and they don't have surnames. They have patronyms, matronyms, and nicknames as last names. And if you don't want any of that, you just replace them, and you've got a city you can drop into your Realms campaign or any other fantasy campaign.
So what you're telling us a lot is that they sound just like dwarves, right?
Dwarves do not sound like
Scottish.
One trick pony, Jeff. You're a one trick pony.
More lube.
More lube. I couldn't help myself.
Well, I suppose if I mention this here, then it will force me to actually have to work on it and finish it. And so,
yes.
I'm because Eric keeps asking me about it, and George slyly asked me about it. So I'm going to slowly be working on the current state of at least one part of the High Moor and how it stands after the Blackstaff novel and 100 years since. So we'll see how quickly I can move along with that, because there's another part of me that really wants to go back down to the Lands of Intrigue and work on the city of Shunok.
Nice. Just
Oh.
remember, stick to the roads, stay clear of the moors.
No kidding.
Give
Come
us
on.
more. Give us more.
King's Moor, that's right. They all sound like it's Scottish.
So for those who don't know what Shun is, although you should, Stephen's great work in Lands of Intrigue and Empires of the Shining Sea, detailing the sprawling empire of the capital of the Shun Imperium, which I always thought of as if you took Undermountain, scooped the whole thing up in your hands, and dropped it on northern Kalimshan, that would be the Shun Empire.
Don't
Don't
forget,
drop
you're
it.
adding
Hurl it down
Knoll.
hard.
You've got to add Knolls and more undead than is
Yes.
in Undermountain. So,
There
I
you
like
go.
it.
is that still shrink wrapped?
I'm not saying.
Wow.
Lands
So,
of Intrigue, right there, buddy.
Yeah.
Lands of Intrigue.
Uh,
Along
If
with all
you
my
can
other box sets.
remember, Stephen, how many years ago was that released?
I wrote that 25 years ago. It was released 24 years ago because it was one of the first things that WotC published after we moved out there.
God, we're old.
Yeah.
That's my
Yeah.
secret
And how
stash
many-
in the closet.
How many phone calls did we have about that product, Stephen?
We probably talked at least 20 to 40 minutes a day for 3 months.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, you were the one keeping me honest and say, okay, well, we got to fix this, headache and so forth. So, but
And
another
one
time.
And one other thing I wanted to say, I haven't sprung this on Ed or anybody else yet, but we're going to start planning another Game with Ed contest coming up for the Mages and Sages podcast. But another time we've already done this once. It was a big success, and we're going to do another contest to be able to sit down and play a game of D&D with Ed and George and Eric and everybody at the show. So like we did a couple months ago.
Sounds
Brian-
good.
Brian.
Tassels. Tassels.
Tassels. There'll be more information on that later on the fans of Ed Greenwood over on Facebook. So I think that's it, guys. We can let everybody go a little early tonight, and we won't make it a trek like we usually do. That's good. I got to get to bed myself. So, all right. I want to thank everybody for coming on the panel as well as people in the audience. It's been wonderful as usual. So, any last words?
Just thanks everybody for coming.
Have a
That's
Thanks
wonderful
for coming,
evening.
Brian.
Stay
Either
healthy.
this wallpaper goes, or I do.
Thank you, Oscar.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you again. Appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun as always. And we hope to see you again next time here on the podcast. And I think we'll probably head back over to Waterdeep for our next one. We'll pick a ward and let everybody know. Maybe
Sounds good.
maybe
Mhm.
North Ward or something. I'm not sure. We did the Dock Ward before, so
And we will answer all those deep Realms Lore questions, like what is a Grecian urn? About $5 an hour.
And on that note,
On that note, can I say
Good night,
goodnight,
everybody.
Gracie?